IDE, Integrated Development Environment. Now, you might have heard softwares or editors so called VS Code and many more. Like there is one called VS Code, which is quite popular these days, and IntelliJ, which is quite popular for Java based editor. But you might have also used an editor without knowing that it is an IDE. IDE is pretty much an environment to develop code. Okay, so we have an IDE. So if you look at it, it's basically a software application that helps programmers develop software code efficiently. Now we could just call it a code editor, but the reason we call it an integrated development environment is because it just not allows you to edit the code. It helps you doing a lot. So if you actually look at it, this is an IDE. Now you can write any language here, any programming language here. This is HTML. See, when I wrote this opening tag, it automatically also wrote this ending tag. So it knows that every open tag needs to have an ending tag. So all this are pretty much features of IDEs. So Visual Studio Code is a very sophisticated IDE, but we also use an IDE without knowing that it's an IDE, which is the Notepad. Now currently I'm using a Mac, so there's no Notepad in Mac. Instead there is a editor called TextEdit. Now if you look at the settings, TextEdit has two options. One is rich text and the other one is a plain text. Plain text is what your Windows version of Notepad does. So plain text is nothing but what you see here. This is just plain text, right? I mean, you don't have any fonts or, I mean, you just can't change anything here. So this is purely plain text. There is no font. Now there is a pretty much advanced version of Notepad, which is called Notepad++. So there was a time before VS Code, probably 10-15 years back, when HTML code, JavaScript code, all these except Java, because for Java, IntelliJ and Eclipse were quite popular, but for JS and HTML and CSS, people used to prefer this Notepad++. So Notepad++ is for Windows, and it used to be like say an advanced version of Notepad. Now we no one uses Notepad++ anymore. So all prefer VS Code, Atom, and many other applications here. But VS Code is quite popular. So so we were talking about the editor, right? So in an editor, you can actually write any programming language because they were all basic text. You don't have to say bold font or anything like that. So these are all basic text. So you could write a HTML code, you could write a C# code, C++ code, Java code. You could write any kind of code in all these editors, like say Notepad, Notepad++. So only thing is it shouldn't be rich text. I'll show you what rich text in the next video. So once you write your code, whatever language it may be, you have to save it with the appropriate, say the extension. Now I'm having an extension called desktop. Okay, so I use HTML, so I saved it as untitled.html. So I go to that folder. So inside that folder, when you click at that untitled.html, it opens in a browser, because that's what we saw in the file extension video, right? So the OS looks at the file extension, and when you click at the file, browser is associated with, the browser app is associated with HTML.html. So it opens the content in the browser. Now if you want to edit that, you can right click and open with and open in any of these softwares, text edit, or you could also open this in Visual Studio Code. You could open this in any editors. Now I'm gonna just do the old fashioned hello world and save it. Command S in Mac and Control S in Windows is to save the file. Now I have saved the file, but you don't see the changes here. There's a reason for that. We'll see that in the browser sessions. So when I refresh it, I see those changes. Okay, so that when you refresh it, that is when the changes are fetched into it. So we'll see in the next video how these editors, these IDEs are different from MS Word and other editors.